She laughed. She denied it, but they heard it. She laughed. Sarah overheard the Lord tell Abraham that she would have a child, and she laughed. Now, I enjoy going for the laugh. I hope some of today's videos made you chuckle a bit. But the angels of the Lord were not trying to be funny. They came to Abraham and Sarah appearing as strangers on a journey, and when Abraham invited them for dinner, insisted that they come for dinner, these angels in disguise repeated the promise that Abraham and Sarah had been told decades before, that they would have a child. For today's sermon, I want us to walk through this spiritual journey, but we're going to take it from Sarah's perspective. Let's see the road that she went down and find out why she laughed. Last week we heard about the moment that God spoke to Abraham and told him to move to a promised land where God would establish through him a great nation. That promise was made to Abraham. His wife Sarai is implied, I guess, but her name isn't mentioned. Not in that first promise that was made in Genesis 12. It takes a while for them to get settled in a new place because when they arrive at that land, there's a famine. The land is barren, a foreshadow of the challenges Sarai will later face. In the next chapter, Genesis 13, the promise is repeated to Abraham that his offspring will be like the dust of the earth, so many that no one could count. But again, Sarai's name isn't mentioned in that promise. Years go by and Abraham and Sarai struggle with fertility. Abraham complains about that to God in chapter 15, and for the first time God makes it explicit that the offspring of Abraham will be his biological descendants, not adoptive ones, not metaphorical ones. Abraham will have a biological child. But if you look closely, you'll see there's no mention of Sarai. The promise is to Abraham. How would that make you feel if you were Sarai? I would bet that she hears this and says to herself, so the problem must be me. Abraham will become the father of a nation, but no one said it would be through Sarai. How devastating. What heartbreak. I wonder about the emotional journey that Sarai went through as she wrestled with this, as she grieved the inability to have children, as she slowly came to terms with it, slowly starting to accept that reality. Sarai is not alone in this struggle. There are many in our churches who have felt that heartbreak too. It's the ache of missing something you never had. I think the Welsh word hiraeth comes closest to capturing that feeling. Hiraeth is that sense of incompleteness you feel when you're acutely aware of missing something in your life. We have grief over what we've lost, but we can also feel grief for things that have never come to pass. That too is painful. For years, Sarai journeyed with that grief, tried to make sense of it all. I bet she felt betrayed by God. Why inspire her with Abraham's dreams and schemes if it wasn't meant to be for her too? Why mislead her? I would be certain that there were periods when Sarai felt angry with God, when she would go out in that field by herself to yell out at the heavens. It was bad enough to be unable to conceive. Even worse, that God would tease her with a vision that wasn't meant for her. That just made the pain worse. When you carry pain long enough, you develop the strength to lift it. The weight of that pain doesn't change, but like any weight training, your muscles get bigger. The pain isn't gone, but it does get somewhat easier to pick up. As Sarah gets used to carrying her burden, she starts to imagine other possibilities. Maybe the promise for Abraham can come true if he has a child through her slave girl Hagar. When she proposes the idea to her husband, you can almost hear Sarah's anger with God being just below the surface. She's holding it in, but it's still there. She says, "You see that the Lord has prevented me from bearing children. Go into my slave girl. It may be that I shall obtain children by her." Genesis 16:2. Hagar does have a child on the first try with Abraham, it seems. And like a pin poking at a swollen blister, Sarai's anger explodes. After the child Ishmael is conceived, Sarai pours out all of her pent-up feelings on that slave girl. The years of anger she had with God, the anger she felt at her husband Abraham, the anger she felt with herself, all of it directed at Hagar. It got so bad that Hagar ran away. We'll tell Hagar's story next week, but for today I want us to listen to Sarai's pain. We need to look at Sarai's pain because it's tempting to look away. Sarai's pain and the way that she vented that pain at Hagar can make us feel convicted. A lot of us carry chronic pains, whether that's physical, emotional, or psychological. We might carry that same anger that Sarai felt. We carry the pain and anger so much and for so long that sometimes we forget how heavy it really is. We got used to that heavy pressure on our shoulders, accustomed to gritting our teeth and pushing through. We forget how much pain we are actually in. That is, until something pricks us. A slight comment, a minor inconvenience, the news that someone got what we wanted for ourselves. All it takes is a small poke, and all of our pent-up anger and frustration gets poured out, sprayed on whoever is standing closest. Can you relate? If so, know that you're not alone. I think we're all guilty of doing that sometimes, all of us in need of some forgiveness and the grace of God. Hagar, the slave girl, does return to Abraham and Sarai. Her child Ishmael is born, and it feels like the tone in these chapters shifts. I wonder how Sarai felt after Hagar ran away. I wonder if she felt ashamed and embarrassed, or maybe just a bit deflated and depressed. It was her idea to involve the slave girl, and through a slave girl this child was born. But Sarai isn't rejoicing. Her pain isn't gone. At least, though, a page is turned. They can start a new chapter, a chapter where Sarai fades more into the background. Sarai's plan worked, and now she feels defeated. Her time is over. It is then, 6 chapters of Genesis, after God's initial promise to Abraham, that God again speaks to Abraham. But this time, chapter 17 of Genesis, God adds another detail. Again, God repeats the covenant, the promise that Abraham will be the father of nations. But this time, God also adds Sarai. God says, "As for Sarai, your wife, you shall not call her Sarai, but Sarai shall be her name. I will bless her, and moreover, give you a son by her." God names her specifically, explicitly including her in the covenant too. This is not just a promise for Abraham. This is not just about the father of nations. The mother matters too. It is Sarah who will do this, as impossible as that sounds. Do you know what Abraham did when God told him this news? He laughed. How can 2 senior citizens have babies? They were in their 80s and 90s at this point. The time for babies is well over. Nonetheless, Abraham accepts this promise and as a sign of that covenant has himself and his household circumcised. In all this time, I'll point out, the covenant and the promise, the words of God, the sightings of the divine, all of it has been through Abraham. God has not spoken, as far as we know, to Sarah directly. She's trusting what she is hearing from her husband. I wonder how much she trusts it, though. Maybe she did at first, but years have gone by, and they've been on quite a roller coaster of emotion. I would suspect at least a little doubt has crept across Sarah's mind. Has her husband sent them on a wild goose chase? Is he really hearing all of this from God? What God asks that the men do that to their foreskins? The line between prophets and madmen is thin, and if I was Sarah, I would be wondering which side of that line we are now standing. So let Abraham rant about his encounters with God. Sarah will turn her focus to running the household. It is now, at this point, when Sarah has just given up and moved on, that 3 strangers appear by the oaks of Mamre. Abraham waves them over and insists that they eat together. Now, I used to preach that this is a sign of ancient Middle Eastern hospitality, but then I got to know some Middle Eastern friends and realized that this is a sign of contemporary Middle Eastern hospitality. You don't just invite people over for dinner, you insist that they come and eat with you. as part of all that insisting, Abraham shouts out at his wife to get cooking and then put out another 3 settings at the table. Now, this is the key part of the story, and the reason I believe that God appeared as a group of visitors. It meant that Abraham had to involve his wife. So she now has a reason, an excuse, in this patriarchal society to be in the room. The conversation these angels have with Abraham is not meant for Abraham. They want Sarah to overhear it. At one point, they even ask, "Oh, where's your wife?" And Abraham just waves it off. "Oh, just over there in the tent." That is when they repeat the same thing that Abraham has already heard, but Sarah has not, that your wife Sarah shall have a son. Just as they suspected, Sarah was hiding behind the tent with her ear in a cup against the wall. She hears this and laughs. Oh, the journey Sarah has been on. From the time her husband made them uproot themselves in search of a promised land, to the fiasco that happened with Hagar, to the point when she's now finally accepted and moved on emotionally. Now, at the end of her life, after years of hearing Abraham speak about this promise, she hears it for herself for the first time. Of course she laughed. Of course she scoffs. Wouldn't you? For all of us who have been on a journey like Sarah's, all of us who have had such high hopes for life but eventually settled for less, all of us who have had a heartache for a dream that never came true, who deeply miss something that we've never had, for us who carry a pain that no one else sees, who have carried it for so long that sometimes we forget how much pain we're actually in, for us who made mistakes along the way and hurt others when the pain got too much, for all those who have resigned our hopes and now just go through the motions. The angels of the Lord have something that they want us to overhear. The Lord hopes that in reading this story today, you are standing at the entrance of the tent cupping your ear. The message they say to Sarah, which is actually meant for you, is this: is anything too wonderful for the Lord? I ask you this now, and I end on this note alone. Is anything too wonderful for the Lord? Whatever it is you're dreaming, whatever it is you've given up on, whatever is still in your heart and leaves you secretly longing, I ask again, is anything too wonderful for the Lord? Whatever it is that bothers you, whatever your thorn in the flesh, whatever pain you carry, if there is any way in which your story lines up with Sarah's, if the idea would make you laugh too, then this message is definitely for you. So one last time, I say, is anything too wonderful for the Lord? Amen.